Thank you. Thank you to the organizers. Thanks to everyone here. We had a great dinner last night. Some great comments that Bjorn kicked us off with, and I probably want to build on that a little bit. Several of the organizers have said to me, thanks for coming such a long distance. I only came from Houston, but it was a little bit of a trip. And I said, well, look, in these days, if you can go somewhere where civility is the #1 priority, I'll travel anywhere for any distance, okay? So it's a welcome opportunity to be here. The Monsignor said last night when you're giving a talk, make sure you make a couple of points and then get off the stage. So that's what I'm going to try to do today, okay? Rather than some long presentation. I don't have any slides either, so I don't mean to disappoint you. But I think the thing that strikes me about a lot of the conversations today, and much of what was discussed last night about all the problems that are in the world, I think it comes down to one thing that many of us perhaps don't reflect on. I was born in 1955. And since then, the world's population's doubled. Think about how remarkable that is, right? If I'm lucky enough to live another 20 years, there'll probably be another 2 billion or so people added to this earth. And so as you look at that, and you look at the fact that those additional 2 billion people are likely, 90% of them, probably going to come in what we consider developing countries. The challenge, I believe, on all the laundry list of everything that's out there, the challenge is energy poverty. There's 1.3 billion people in this earth today that don't have access to basic energy at all. And so when you go down that list of clean water and this and that and the other thing, I could argue that with real, sustainable energy available to all people in the world, I could make an argument you could eradicate a pretty good portion, if not all, of the list that was shown last night. And I think that's really the fundamental challenge that we have. And look, we're all in a beautiful place here. Wonderful setting. We live in what I could easily call, in my own humble opinion, the greatest country in the world in terms of access to everything that we have. And we're very fortunate. But I've also had the opportunity to travel in business around the world, and it's not like that everywhere else, not even close. So when I say sustainable energy, what do I mean? I'm sorry, I'm going to make my list 3. It's going to be 3 things, Monsignor, okay? The first thing for sustainable energy, and it's really sort of a linear progression, so stick with me here for a second. If you don't have energy, your first and foremost is, I need it, I want it, I have to have access. And what's access? Well, access could be access to fuels, technologies. It could be access to the ability to acquire that energy in a reliable form, a useful form, a form that can allow you to not only sustain your personal needs, but actually, if you were in a developing country, how do you have access to an energy system that can allow you to be competitive on a global market in terms of the industries that you're supporting and how you would utilize that energy? Access, #1. And if you've got access to anything, really, what's the second question any of us would ask if somebody says, would you like to have something? I know what I'd ask. How much? What's it cost? It's affordability. If it's accessible but absolutely unaffordable, then it's really not accessible. So if you think about it in that term, as people are trying to build their lives, live their lives, succeed, grow their families, they have to have affordable energy that they can rely on. Industries have to have the kind of energy supplies that enable them to produce goods and services not only for their own people in the country that they're serving, but if you really want to be on a competitive world stage, you have to have affordable, reliable energy to run your industries. And if you've made it through those two, and you're on that path toward what I would call a developed type of economy, the third thing you have to have and hold closely is environmental responsibility. It's fundamental to sustainability. You have to be environmentally responsible. Now, you've got to get there with access and affordability, but once you're there and you have that responsibility for the world stage that you're on, it's environmental responsibility. So what is environmental responsibility? One of the concerns I have these days is it seems to be defined almost exclusively by carbon dioxide emissions and climate change. We're here to talk about that. But a concern that I have is that environmental responsibility includes water, land use, the communities that you live in, the workers that are involved in the production of goods and services. It's the entire environment that we all exist in. And I think part of last night's presentation really crystallized the fact that there are a lot of things going on in this world. And I think when we overly simplify to something like simply carbon dioxide emissions as the environmental responsibility, that's selling it short, I think. It also says that in terms of environmental responsibility, in terms of CO2 emissions, there's also methane emissions, there's fertilizers, there's all the things that we've done as a society, as we've doubled our population and we continue to grow, we're doing a lot of things to impact our environmental footprint. We need to be conscious of that. We have to be conscious of that. We have a responsibility to be so. So if you put all that together and you think about policy and how to enable energy sustainability in its true sense of the word, I think there's one key element here that we cannot ignore, and that is technology transformation. Without it, policy sounds pretty hollow to me. I'd like to do this, I'd like to do that. Well, sure, I'd like to have a new car and a full tank of gas for Christmas too, but I don't know that I'm going to get that, all right? But at the end of the day, if you've got enabling technology or your policy is thoughtful enough to enable that technology to get to where it needs to go, to create the outcomes that we all want, that's meaningful policy. When you make statements, oftentimes shrouded with political support behind it, one way or the other, often it's emotional, and you don't really have a clear sense of how the technology enabling roadmap will get you there, you're not going to make it. You know, we decided we wanted to go to the moon back in the 60s. We're going to go to the moon. Well, we didn't have technology to go to the moon, but we had a wherewithal and a spend and an expectation of where our program would take us to get us to the moon, and we knew there was going to be a time horizon. In the 1970s in this country, when we were expanding a lot of our industries, we had all kinds of problems. You're probably very aware of them, many of you. Acid rain. And what was coming from the middle of our country in the Rust Belt, coming over to New England and putting acid rain in place. And it was unacceptable, not sustainable. So what did we do in terms of our public-private partnership in this country? With industry, national laboratories working together, the federal government supporting a roadmap to create, over the next 20 years from 1970 to 1990, a roadmap for coal-fired power plants in this country that would, in that period of time, double the amount of capacity of electricity generated in this country for the growth that we were experiencing. And at the same time, reducing NOx, SOx, mercury, and suspended particulates by 90%, even while we doubled the amount of energy that we were producing from those plants. And you say to yourself, How do you do that? Well, policies enabled it, but really technology created the outcome. In the 1990s, we decided as a country we wanted to get sulfur out of gasoline. We had to do it. It was important. We need to develop new catalysts. We need to reconfigure our refineries in the way we did our business. And we set up a roadmap that created, over a period of time in the early part of this century, milestones where we were going to be reducing sulfur from gasoline and tailpipe emissions. And you know what? We did it. We reconfigured those refineries. We built hydrogen systems. I worked at a company called Praxair, and we created a $1 billion business in about 20 years supplying hydrogen to refineries so that they could get that sulfur out of the fuel. We developed catalytic converters, and we actually transformed the fleet that we're driving today. We did it because we had policy married with technology to get an outcome. Today, I worry, I believe your presentation suggested it, Bjorn, that we're underinvesting dramatically in research and development. We're underinvesting in that technology transformations and the transitions that are so important to our country. You can't just have policy and argue about it. You can't expect technology to magically occur. There needs to be a fundamental commitment to it. And I think that would be the message I would leave in my remarks here this morning, is that as we look at technology and how it plays, policy that's uninformed by technology is doomed to not work. And technologies that are going to transform us will require policies to get us to that point. And that's where that intersection occurs. Thanks.
Great. Thank you, Chuck.